let's get started, Andres, because we have a few, things to get out of the introduction, and then we'll just give people a chance to join. So I'm super excited that you're here. I added in the invite that we have some commonality culturally, from having had an upbringing in Venezuela, and I mentioned, you are also a Colombian citizen and also a U.S. Citizen. So can you give us a little bit of an intro of who you are personally, and then we'll take it from there.
So my background, both from a personal perspective and professional perspective, is a little bit diverse. So as Lindsay was mentioning, I was born in Venezuela, but my parents are from Colombia. So when I was 3, we moved back to Colombia. And then at the age of 7, we lived in a coal mine. So I basically grew up in a coal mine. It sounds not that appealing, but it was actually a compound owned by ExxonMobil in northern Colombia. Then you get a picture of how nice it was actually to grow up in the coal mine. And that's where I actually learned to speak English, and that's where I got a lot of exposure to the culture in the US. And more importantly, the values and the work ethic in the US, which is something that always attracted me to this market. Things like being punctual, keeping your word, trusting one another. Those are values that I see in the work culture here in the US. And that was thanks to my upbringing and having lived in this coal mine. Then for my senior year, I moved to Bogota. And then from there, I went to college and I studied business administration. And I started my career in banking. So I spent 7 years working for Citi, doing corporate loans, risk analysis, investment banking, always working with corporate clients. And that's when I really took an interest on the corporate side of things, and I decided to move to the corporate world, knowing that my passion was around numbers and finance. So that led me to a career that's going now for 17 years on the corporate side, always working within the finance function. I've done work for nonprofits, a energy company, a forklift distributor, 10 years in consulting, and then for the past 18 months on a startup technology company. So very diverse in industry-wide, but always trying to what I would call mature the finance organization. That's what led me to my first post, which is what we're talking about today, and that is how the role of the CFO has evolved. And that's part of what I've seen through almost the 2 decades that I've been working in finance. Is when I started, the most important piece for finance was around bookkeeping. So basically, people thought about finance as where they needed to go to understand the numbers, understand the assets, the liabilities, the profit and loss, the cash flow. But that bookkeeping has quickly evolved. Then the next stage was they saw finance as a steward and someone who was safekeeping the finances of the organization. And then I would say, for my consulting career, I started noticing that finance was always more present on the strategy side, on decision making, and understanding what are the key levers from a business and operations perspective that need to be moved and worked on so that there's more value on what we're extracting from the company. And that's why, in my view, finance plays a key role within the organization, because we have multiple hats and multiple roles. But the most important thing for me is we translate what is happening on the business, on the operations side. We translate that into what is going to be the financial implications for the company. So we translate when a decision is made from a strategy perspective, how that will impact the finances of the organization. And that's what I've been doing for the past couple of years, is trying to bring up front what the finance role is, how do we add value to the organization, and how we play a role as a strategic advisor, and how we're a crucial part of the business in any of the businesses that I've worked in, and that finance needs to play a key role.
Okay. So I'm gonna start saying that you're probably one of the only people I know in finance that speaks about finance with that much passion. So I cannot wait to dive into your mindset and your values and your philosophy, because typically when you think about the finance world, the first thing that comes to mind is revenue and overhead and those type of hardcore topics. We never think about it from the perspective of value and the role that it plays to make the organization better, and more over you as a content creator, how you're thinking about LinkedIn, how you're trying to bring those topics in a succinct way for other people to become interested in those. So I'm so excited that we get to dive into that, and I want to welcome Julie as well. Thank you for being here, Julie. Julie is one of my current mentors in so many different ways, and also she focuses on thought leadership. Andres, she may be a very good person for you to connect with, because I think in a way what you're trying to do is bring your passion, bring your knowledge, and become a thought leader in your field. And the first steps that you're taking to use to leverage LinkedIn in that fashion seem to be like the glue that is gonna bring all this together. So for those who are joining, Rogelio, welcome. The format for this interview is an interview/conversation. I have a few questions that I like to kick off with that are going to take you, Andres, on the backstage of you as a content creator first, and then we're going to take that to dive into your more of your leadership in the finance area. But it's very important to understand your mindset, how it's changing in terms of now being a voice for your field on this platform. So the first question I want to ask you, as we keep building on this topic, is I always try to understand, like, what does it mean to be a content creator from each of your perspectives. And I came up with this ABC framework for content creation. So I want to know from your perspective what that looks like. So let's start with a thing that you often leave for the last minute when you're thinking about posting your content on LinkedIn.
So I have to say that this is something new, and there are two things that I've always dreaded, and I dreaded them when I was in consulting. One was around the sales process. I always thought that sales were very challenging and very complicated. I'm a execution kind of guy. And then the second one is on when I went up the ranks in consulting, you also had to do what they call thought leadership. So basically content creation. And I always thought that has to be super hard. Like, where do you get the topics from? Will people react positively to what you're saying? And then are people actually going to be interested in what you're saying? So the one thing that I often leave last minute is the actual event of submitting it, of posting it, of releasing it to the world. I like to have conversations. I always keep a handful of interesting facts just so that I keep the conversations interesting. But I find it hard to put it out there on paper because I feel that that's so permanent, and I don't wanna screw it up. So I think the one thing that I leave last minute is the actual posting and letting it go and reach the world.
Imagine that you can screw up a post. We need to talk about that because I feel like I also suffer from, sometimes I overthink it because I don't want to put something out there that may not have the intention that I imagine. So we'll get to that. But let's go with the letter B of this framework. So what's the best practice that you've learned so far?
Best practice. Put a little bit about who you are on your post. I've only done a couple, but I think at the beginning I was trying to be more stringent and squared and make sure the message comes across. And I doubted myself if I should put in like little nuggets of who I am and what I actually think. Mm-hmm. So going back to the post on the game has changed for CFOs, I wanted to mention that finance is no longer the ugly Betty working out of a closet, because that would resonate with the people that I was working with in a number of companies, because I would always tell them, my main objective is we have to take each and every one of you out of the closet and into the spotlight, because finance is usually like back office. No one knows where they sit. No one wants to talk to them. And that was the beginning of that novela. Was Ugly Betty was working out of a closet. But at the end, she was front and center. Everyone knew her, and she had this amazing transformation, both from a personality and her physical appearance. Mm-hmm. That to me is what's happening to finance. So I wanted to sprinkle a little bit of that personal touch. So I would say that best practice is sprinkle in a little bit of who you are and put a personal touch to your post.
That's amazing. I know the Ugly Betty version, the TV series that was made in the US. Hopefully, Kirt and Julie and Rogelio, you've seen the version, the American version of that. But it was actually a Colombian soap opera back in the 90s. That was super, super, super popular. I remember working in advertising when they released Ugly Betty, and the work schedule in Venezuela, we had 2 hours for lunch from 12 to 2. And they used to air Ugly Betty, I think it was at 1 p.m. And so the whole agency will stop and we will get in a conference room just to watch the telenovela. But that's a side note.
Yes.
And then what is a creativity booster when now that you kind of have gotten more into the rhythm of, building a structure for creating more and more content, you have when you're uninspired or when you feel like, you don't want to screw it up, like you said, what do you use to get you out of that mindset?
So there are companies that I follow. So being a alumni of Deloitte and EY Parthenon and Citi and some other companies, they usually, again, they have really good thought leadership. And there are a couple of topics that I tend to gravitate around. So whenever I see them posting something about that topic, that triggers my imagination. So I'm very passionate about IPOs, M&A, the service delivery models and operating models, anything around the accounting close. So when I see posts that are around those topics, I usually say like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I can take a little bit from what they're saying and put my personal touch around them. And then the other thing that also is catching my eye from a creativity perspective is the way finance is evolving and the world around us is evolving. So I would always imagine, or when I started my career, that finance was pretty much defined and it wasn't going to be very different from when I started my career until when I would retire. But what I've seen is every single function within a company has had a dramatic change and a shift from the way the work had been performed before and how it's done today. And that's not something that has happened to finance. So all these changes that are happening in other functions, in other industries, I also tend to leverage them as creativity boosters for what's happening in finance. And I try to see analogies or things that are similar between what people would say are completely different functions or services.
That's amazing. I keep reconciling your very unique point of view, because you're trying to bring forward a very pragmatic topic, but you still talk about it from the point of view of creativity and imagination and inspiration. In from my vantage point, is unique, that you bring together pragmatism and innovation, in such a genuine way, in the way that you think about it. So what I'm gonna do to keep dissecting this, I have your, yeah,
Can I interrupt?
yeah,
I'm gonna give you a very unique, interesting fact about myself.
okay,
And this is probably the one thing that people tend to remember the most.
okay.
So you talk about imagination.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have imagination. So
I think you do.
No. So let me, and this is a fact.
Okay.
So, my brain is a radio, not a TV. So if I close my eyes and I try to imagine a car, a plane, anything, my brain is blank. It's black, actually. I see darkness. I don't see any images on my brain. I only hear. So my brain is full of voices, sounds, but there's no images. So growing up, I had a friend and I would tell her a story and then she would be like, oh, that was horrible or disgusting or whatever. And I'm like, why are you saying that? And then she's like, oh, because I saw it on like, I lived it on my mind. And like, wow, that's so amazing. Like you could see things inside your brain. And she looked at me like, yes, we all can do that. And so I knew that my brain was a little bit different. And this is actually called aphantasia.
Wow.
So I have a lack of fantasy. So I hate reading because I read a book and it's just sentence, 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 and there's no images. But what I've realized is, since it doesn't have a real live impact on my life, like it's not a disability or anything, there's a lot of people that have this and they don't even know that they are also like myself, that we lack the ability of seeing images in our brain. So I have a very simple test that I do on people, and I ask them to close their eyes, and they say, imagine an apple. And then I say, what color is it? Regular people would say, oh, it's red or green or whatever. If you ask me and people without the ability to see the image, they would say things like, doesn't matter what color it is, or it could be red or green. And then I know if they have this response, that they have no ability of seeing things in their brain. And at the beginning, you say, hey, you lack imagination and you cannot see an image. And they're like, of course I can. And then you realize, and they realize that they can't. So thank you for saying that I have imagination, because literally I don't.
You have taught me something absolutely new to me, and it's fascinating. And I mean, maybe you imagine in radio waves, you know?
I imagine it, yeah, my imagination is sounds.
That's
so
amazing.
If I want to remember something, I have to say it. So let's say I see your picture, Lindsay, and I see you wearing like a black turtleneck. I have to say, Lindsay is wearing a black turtleneck, so I can remember.
Okay, so I'm wearing a black turtleneck as we speak, and you haven't seen me yet. Okay, so that's getting scary.
Yeah, but if I see you, so my biggest fear, and I know we're digressing. My biggest fear is going to the mall with my kids and losing one of my kids, and then someone asking what are they wearing. I have no idea. But anyway, let's go back to finance.
I love it though. Okay, so well, the premise of this whole conversation is that that we put voice and sounds to your post. Okay, so it is, if my LinkedIn post could talk, what would it look like? What would it sound like, and what would it say?
Yeah.
So I have your post in front of me. Let me ask you this first. Did you, when you wrote it, did you have anybody, your wife or anybody, like, let's say, read it out loud back to you at all?
No, just me, myself, and I.
Okay. So I'm gonna take fragments of your post just to catch us up together with the sentiment of what you wanted to communicate, but it's gonna sound like me, okay?
Okay.
So the good thing, and I always say this, and Mohan, who just joined, my friend Mohan, said, your accent is great. But I always say, you're gonna listen to what you wrote in my accent. Luckily for the two of us, we both have an accent this time.
Yes, yes, we do.
So I'm gonna take fragments of the post so that we can dive deeper into your motivation and other things I have questions about in the time that we have here. So you started with the game has changed for CFOs, and you're having a call to action there for CFOs to embrace that the game is changing, that the rules are being written. You mentioned today CFOs are being called onto the field as a strategic business partner, leveraging data and analytics to drive innovation and growth strategies across the organization. It's time to trade in that green eye shade for a coach's headset. Then you bring something really interesting to the forefront around digital disruption. And you say that to win in this environment, you need to combine financial acumen with a strategic mindset and digital savviness, basically. This means using data-driven insights to identify business opportunities, optimizing operations, through process automation and guiding strategic investments. And then is when you mentioned from the back office of the board to the boardroom, no longer ugly Betty, which is what we were talking about earlier, is working out of the closet. So you're basically telling modern CFOs that they need to play, they need to be in the front row seat, making decisions. You're now tasked with translating complex financial data into actionable insights that shape the business across the enterprise. Think of yourself as the ultimate multilingual translator, fluently bridging the language of finance with every facet of business operations. And there are a number of key remarks there that continue to emphasize data analytics, process automation, strategic risk management. But you end with this call to action that I thought was really, again, I do think it comes from a place of trying to inspire, taking a bigger game in their hands. And you say it's a brave new world for CFOs to navigate, filled with both risks and rich opportunities. Will you embrace the challenge and take the rightful place as a strategic partner driving enterprise innovation? The game is on. Are you ready to play? So I'm going to pause there. And as you reflect back on this message, right? It's definitely coming in from a place of a lot of conviction, Andres, and passion, and really living up to your own values of work ethics, and breaking through and trying to change the game, and being a disruptor. But when you wrote it, what triggered you to touch on that specifically?
So a couple of things. So one is I talked about analogies.
Mhm.
So I wanted to talk about finance with a lens that is not necessarily finance or business. And that's why I wanted to make this analogy to the world of sports. And I was lucky enough that I could find in Google a image of a accountant wearing this hat with the green visor, and then obviously the Patriots coach with the headset. And that's the perfect image for the analogy that finance needs to evolve from a number crunching person that's in the back office, in the sidelines, not actively calling in the plays, and becoming the voice in the headset, and the voice that's coaching the company on what direction it should take, what actions it should take. And that's basically the analogy that I wanted to bring forward with the post. So that's why you see a lot of these references from finance versus the sport, and then the game is on, and are you ready to play, and all these little messages. Because I truly believe that we in finance are living through a renaissance, because now we are given the opportunity and the voice that we can influence the way companies behave and companies execute their strategy. And it goes beyond just saying what the impact will be on your profit and loss, or on your balance sheet, but actually on the trajectory of the company. We have the ability of moving levers that will either expedite the growth potential of the company, or will stall that growth. We also have the ability of reducing the unnecessary spend in the company if we put the right lens on the analysis. So that is basically what triggered the way I wrote the piece. And again, that analogy between sports and finance, because what I've seen is if you try to communicate, and that's why I also touch base on the finance needs to be a translator of a lot of things, is if you put it on a language that other teams understand, then your message comes across much easier. So I remember when I was working for the nonprofit organization, I had to explain to environmentalists and scientists what a budget center was, what a cost center was, how to manage their budget. And at the beginning, I was talking Chinese. Like they couldn't understand a thing. Like, what do you mean cost centers? What do you mean about a budget? What do you mean about revenue versus cost? I don't understand a thing you're saying. And then one day, I asked one of the scientists. I said, "Can I take a look at your wallet?" And he looked at me like, "You're nuts." But he showed me his wallet, and then I could see that it had two separate compartments. And I asked him, "Why do you have some money on one side and some money on the other side of your wallet?" And he said, "Oh, because one side of the wallet is money that I can use on wants, and the other one is money that I only use on needs." And I'm like, wow, that's a very interesting concept. So your wallet, basically, you have two cost centers. One cost center for the things that are mandatory, and one cost center for things that are optional. And then he's like, that makes total sense. How he thinks about cost centers in the way that he has like different envelopes or compartments for money. So that's how I explained to him what a cost center was. And then when we started talking about accounts, I asked him like, do you know like what type of utilities do you pay? And then he started saying, oh, I pay the electricity bill and water and gas. And I'm like, well, imagine each one of them is an account. So like just give those names to your accounts. So one account is now payroll, another account is utilities, another account is third-party spend. So it's just another way of naming the same things that you use in your house. So now he understood the concept around accounts. And then we started talking about budget. And he's like, I don't know how to budget. No one knows how to budget. And then I asked him, do you know how much you'll pay in electricity next month? And he's like, yeah, I kind of know. It's probably going to be between X and Y. And then I asked him, do you know how much you're going to pay for rent? And he's like, yeah, it's fixed. I know exactly how much I'm going to pay for rent. And then I told him, what you just did is budgeting, but for your household. Now I need you to do the same thing, but for your projects. And so I try to make these analogies so that I can translate the financial concepts in ways that people can understand and digest them. And at the end of the day, I had all these scientists talking about cost centers and accounts and budgets to the general manager of each of the countries, and they were like, when did these people go to financial classes, and how are they so fluent on financial terms? And I told them we just made a translator, and now they speak finance, and it was beautiful. And that's what I try to do on the messaging that I convey is make it easier for people to talk finance.
Oh my God, that is so, I mean, you really acted like a change agent too. Because in a way, the environment that you were in needed that type of disruption in order to evolve. And I think it was really magical the way in which you approached it, trying to meet them where they are or where they were, and not only translating the length, using analogies and easier framework, more relatable framing to make the topics relatable to them, but the approach to really educate them without making them feel like they were so behind or that they were dumb. Or it takes a special kind of leadership to come in with that patient approach. I feel like a lot of leaders that I work with, and especially in times of disruption, lose their patience in trying to make others get on board, right? By walking in their shoes first. And not only does it speak about your values, but also your ability to empathize. That's what I'm gathering from that.
And translating is hard, and
Mhm.
speaking is hard, because as English is our second language, we feel it firsthand, right? So
Yeah.
if someone doesn't use the right term from a financial perspective, I don't blame them. It's not their first language, it's their second language. Like, they speak scientific terms fluently because that's their first language, but finance is their second language. So if they mispronounce a word or they confuse a word, it's totally normal, because it's a stretch for them. Now they speak two languages. And when you're talking to IT folks, and you're talking to salespeople, and you're talking to human capital folks and finance, the people that can talk to all of these teams, they're able to speak 4 or 5 languages. Sales has their own language, marketing has their own language, IT, HR, all of them have their own language. So if they can speak to all these people, they're fluent in multiple languages. And I really admire those people that can talk to all these different audiences.
Julie, I'm going to pick on you in a minute, because one of the other things that this is making me think about is the work that you do with trying to educate us around thought leadership. I think there's a level of translation there that happens um, to try and take our experiences, which are unknown to the people that we try to connect with, and write them and put them out into the world in a way that connects to other people. So there's a level of translation in empathy, and in that sort of patient approach that Andres is discussing with us, to try to make ideas relatable for other people from that vantage point too. I didn't think about it that way before, but I'm kind of connecting the dots that way. Did you, Andres, when you put that out there, did you receive any particular comments, or did somebody reach out to you with a reaction, or something to your yeah, let's call it that, to your thought leadership when you expressed your perspective in your post?
It's interesting because I didn't get a lot of comments on the post itself, but I did get WhatsApp messages and emails, and people that I hadn't connected in a while. They did reach out offline, and I think the post had two very positive impacts. One is a lot of people that I hadn't connected in many years, my name came to mind, and they wanted to reach out, so that was nice. And then the second one is a lot of people saying, I get it, and I see it, and now I understand why my CEO is asking me for this. Because the thing that also happens is, when we are busy on our day-to-day activities, we lose touch of why other people are asking stretch goals from us. So when CFOs get approached by the CEO or the board of directors, and they're asking for things that we might feel are outside of our day-to-day activities, it may not come natural to understand why that is. But this post was trying to illustrate why that's happening, and why that we need to start speaking all these other languages so that we add value to the organization.
That's awesome. That's really great. I think this is a topic that, you know, we could stay on for a long time. I'm personally fascinated by your take in particular. But we're about to approach the end of the audio chat, and I don't want to lose Kurt and Julie without them knowing more specifically about you. Maybe can you give us your top 3 things that we cannot live today without knowing and remembering about you?
So beyond the finance piece, I think one of the things that I would like for you to take away from this call is everyone thinks differently. Diversity is goes so much deeper than just the way we were, our upbringing, the way we look, where we're from. There's diversity in so many ways. Like, I started sharing this piece of my Aphantasia and how I lack imagination. And someone, actually a couple of people, they shared with me that they see people in different colors, and based on if they're kind or they're stubborn or they come across as angry, they see them like pink or yellow or green. And I met a few people that actually see people in color. So just imagine how many different points of view and different ways of seeing the world there are. So that's one thing. And then the other one is everyone is an expert on very different fields. Try to think of creative ways of communicating what you know so that other people can understand what you're saying in their particular language. So we finance people understand numbers, and it's easier for us to get numbers. So if you're talking about something that's completely out of my realm of expertise, so human capital, and you try to translate that into numbers, and I will get it much easier and quicker. So those 2 things. Try to speak the language of whoever is your listener. And then the second one is diversity in thought is overwhelming. There's a universe of different ways of how people see the world and react to the world that is completely different to how you see the world.
Oh, thank you. Andres, we need to keep talking. We need to do a part 2. I'm very excited that we got to meet you, to connect with you, to learn about you. I want to thank Kurt and Julie and Brandon. Thank you for joining. We're about to wrap up, but I'm gonna post the recording of our conversation today. I think it was really, you know, enlightening, and it gave me, at least personally, a perspective on this topic that I didn't have before. But we're getting to the end of it, and we're gonna have to wrap it up. So Andres, thank you so much for being here. We'll definitely, you know, stay connected with you. Reach out to Kier and Julie and Brandon and Mohan, who had to leave. They're really great contacts that can help you continue to build your network forward, and you can learn from them so many other things too.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you for making it another week with us. We'll see you again next Wednesday.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.